but I want to talk about the plant called wintergreen. Oh, did you ask about that one? Awesome. Cool. That's good. That's great. Cool. Well, I'm glad that it was you and that you're here. So today, I'm going to pull up this photo to start with. So I might have to also find some images on the internet as we go, because I want to make sure that we can identify this. There's another plant called partridge berry that I don't have pictures of at the moment that sometimes people think is wintergreen. And they often grow pretty close to each other. So I want to remember to show you what partridge berry looks like before we're done today. So this is wintergreen. Wintergreen is fairly common throughout a good portion of the United States, but it loves, more than anything, it really prefers acidic soil. So acid instead of basic, or acid instead of alkaline. These are two words that, are you familiar with these words? Oh, sorry, I lost you. No, you're not particularly, yeah, okay. So I think that it would be a good idea for us today to talk about acid versus alkaline soil, because it's a really important concept when we're learning about plants and when we're learning about growing conditions, planting our own gardens, and learning about the soils that we have in our yards, or if we're foraging, if we're looking for foods, making sure that we know a little bit more about the soils where we're looking for things, because then we can narrow down what we might find in those places that we'll learn, over time. It's really important to know these things. So gonna start. So today's plant is wintergreen. Latin name is Gaultheria procumbens. It's a weird name. And it's in the family Ericaceae, which is also known as the heath family or the blueberry family. So there are similarities in the Ericaceae family that, and one of the main similarities for all of these plants, which include cranberries, blueberries, rhododendrons, azaleas, and this wintergreen that we're talking about today, one of the most common characteristics of this family, this Ericaceae family, is that they love acidic soil. So let's see, I'm going to pull up, hopefully this is big enough. No, that doesn't look great. So, does anybody want to give me any information that they have on what acid is, or acid versus base, what that is? Anybody have any words that they want to use to describe that? All right, so we're starting from 0. This is good to know, because if we don't know these things, I want to make sure that you do understand, and I want to try to give you a good explanation. So, Elijah, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, acid is like something that's like water, but it burns you.
Sure.
It burns through things.
Sure. So actually, if something is purely acid, and if something is purely basic, they both will burn you, but for different reasons. So something that is really acidic that we are familiar with is lemon juice. Lemon juice is a fairly acidic thing. It's not so acidic that it will burn us. We can drink lemon juice, but you know that flavor, right? That flavor of lemon juice, how it's like really tart and kind of burns a little bit. Like if you drank a lot, it would probably hurt you, right? It would be like hard, kind of hard on your stomach. But a little bit, in a little quantity, it's actually pretty good for us. So lemon juice is on the side of things that are considered acid. Orange juice, which is, oranges and lemons are similar to each other. Orange juice is also acidic. And then on the other side of things, some stuff that's alkaline or basic is something that's considered like that we are used to in our kitchens that is very basic is baking soda. So has anybody in school ever done an experiment where you add vinegar and baking soda together? Has anyone ever done that? All right, so who wants to talk to me about that? Liv, let's see if we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, at first, I think we didn't do it right because we were disappointed that it didn't make a big explosion. Then when we went outside, we did it right. And
so what'd you do? How exactly what happened?
Well, we got vinegar and we poured it into like a little bowl of baking soda, and then my teacher mixed it.
So has anyone seen like the explosion happen? I bet I can tell you why it didn't explode necessarily in a bowl. So okay, Baron, you look really excited. So tell us about your experiment.
So actually I got this for a birthday, and it's a little volcano. So I put some baking soda in it, and then all I had to do is pour some vinegar in, and it just went poof, really.
Yes.
And it made huge, like all foamy.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, I lost you, sorry. So that's the basic experiment, like that what Liv did and what you did, Baron, are the same. The reason why one of you saw kind of an explosion and one of you didn't is because what happens when the acid from the vinegar and the base from the baking soda combine is a bunch of gas is given off. So if you had baking soda in like a water bottle, or like a soda bottle or something, and then you poured vinegar into it, the gas that is given off in this chemical reaction would cause an explosion. There would be like bubbles like crazy, and it would be foaming all over the place. And that's because when the acid and the base combine with each other, they're becoming what's called neutral. So they're actually like balancing each other out. There's like there's like a spectrum, this pH spectrum, which has acid on one side and base on the other. And I had a picture, but it doesn't look good. So I want to try to find a better picture so that we can see what I'm talking about. When I opened up the picture, it was all it was mostly black, so you wouldn't have been able to see it. All right, this is a good one, I think. Hopefully we can see this. Give me 1 second. My internet's acting up again. Sorry, guys. All right. Elijah, you have a question?
I don't know what we're learning about.
What'd you say?
I don't know what we're learning about.
Oh, we're learning about a plant called wintergreen, and the wintergreen really likes acidic soil. So what I have here to show you all is this is a pH scale, and you can see what I'm talking about based on things in our kitchens, whether they are acid or base. So when we talk about acids, so our stomachs, in order to digest all of the foods that we take in, our stomachs are actually very acidic. So that over here is like a 1 on the pH scale. And then all the way over to the other side, on the basic side, this says oven cleaner, right? So like oven cleaner, so baking soda is over here. It's actually not even that basic. Soap is very basic. So these are a lot of like cleaners on this side, right? And over here we have a lot of foods that are acidic. So in the middle, neutral, is where pure water is. And what we really want for the thing that is best for the most plants to grow in is right in this middle range. This range of like milk and pure water and eggs, where it says neutral, is what we really want. That's the really ideal place for most of our garden plants that we're most commonly familiar with, right? But there are a lot of places in this where we live that have soil that's acid, and there are a lot of places that have soil that's basic. Where I live, and probably a lot of places that you have seen, are pretty acidic, and there are very specific plants that need to grow in these places that can tolerate it. Who here is familiar with forests that have lots of pine trees in them? Yeah. So I live in a place that is pretty much entirely pine trees. It's lots of oak trees, but also mostly pine trees. And my woods, the woods that are behind my house, with all of this really acidic soil, have wintergreen and lots of blueberries, lots of pine trees, and the acidic soil comes largely from the pine. So pine needles are very acidic. And this is something that over a really, really long period of time, the pine needles break down. They fall off the tree when they die, they fall off the tree. And over time, the soil becomes more and more acidic because of the acid in the pine needles. I have an easy experiment that you can do to figure out whether your soil is acidic or basic, and it's very similar to the experiment, like the volcano experiment that we already talked about. And all it takes is a cup of soil and half a cup of water. And I should bring this up. So you can do your own soil test to figure out if you have acid soil or basic soil. And it's pretty easy. If you have baking soda or vinegar in your house, you can just take a cup of soil and half a cup of water, or a cup of soil with half a cup of vinegar, and then you can figure out, see if you get bubbles on either side. It'll tell you whether you have acidic soil or whether you have basic soil. If you don't really get any bubbles at all, that means that you have more neutral soil, that kind of like right in the middle soil. So I will put a link on my website to this image, but it's a very simple experiment you can do in your kitchen or outside, maybe be a little bit less messy if you do it like in your backyard, right where you find your soil. Does anybody have questions about that? Does it make sense? If anybody does this experiment at home, I would love for you to report back to me to tell me what you find out whenever you do it. So you can tell me before we start on our next lesson or something like that. So I want to talk a little bit more about this wintergreen plant. Here's another pretty photo. It generally is it's quite a small plant. It's considered a ground cover. Just like other, like violet that we talked about yesterday is also ground cover, something that's kind of low to the ground. It's like 4 to 8 inches tall, and one individual plant itself is pretty small, right? It's only like 4 inches tall, like 4 inches wide, but it trails. So this here is like a full mat of tons and tons of wintergreen plants that are all growing together and covering this area of woods. And you can see it's growing under pine, a few different kinds. This looks like maybe a juniper over here, and this is some sort of pine tree over here. There's a bunch of different evergreens around you can see in this photo. And this is exactly the kind of environment that wintergreen loves. Loves growing, covering forest floors, surrounded by other evergreens, by pine trees. Wintergreen is also evergreen. So it keeps this color leaves all year round. And in the fall, it does turn reddish, or actually, I'm not sure if that's true. This might actually be new growth, these red leaves here. One thing to note, if you find, I can try to pull up a close-up picture of this. One thing that's important to know is that it really requires full sunlight if you're going to get berries. So a lot of times you'll find flowers, or you'll find leaves, but you won't find berries because there isn't enough sunlight. Liv, do you have the picture of wintergreen that you want to share with us? Hold on one second. Maybe. Oh yeah, cool. It's a little guy. Yep, all by itself. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Baron, you have a question?
What color are the flowers?
Great question. The flowers are usually they're usually white, although sometimes they can have a little bit of pink in them, like streaks of pink. So here's a photo. And these flowers here for the wintergreen plant are very similar to what flowers look like in the entire family that wintergreen is a part of. So remember I said the Ericaceae family. The Ericaceae family, like with blueberries and with cranberries and with rhododendrons and azaleas, these are really, really common plants in my area. My entire woods are like taken over with most of those things. Almost all of the flowers look like this on all of those plants. They might be different colors, but they have this kind of drooping, they almost look like berries on their own, right? Like they kind of have almost like a round berry-like look to them, just in their flower form. So that you can see there's like maybe a little bit of pink here in these berries. Sometimes they have a lot more pink than that. And you can see that the leaves, so imagine this being like 4 inches tall. These plants are very small. You can see all the moss growing around them. So their leaves are like 1.5 inches to 3 inches long, maybe like 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches or so. And this is what they usually flower in the middle of the summer where I am. So in like July, and then their berries come out later in the season, like in the fall, in the late fall where I am. Let's see. Elijah, is that a question that you have? Oh, sorry. There you go.
Are they edible?
Yes, they are edible, which leads me to the next part. So the leaves, they're called, well, Okay, who wants to tell me when they hear the word wintergreen, what do they think of? Like if you had never heard of this plant before and you heard wintergreen, what do you think?
I would think it would be like a Christmas tree or something.
Okay, yeah, like a Christmas tree. Sure. Jaden, what do you got?
I was thinking of like small on the ground, kind of like a trout lily, but yeah, the red berries. And they grow in the winter too. They're called wintergreen, like a pine tree. They're green all winter. I was thinking of something like that.
Yeah, they're evergreen and they have these red berries that can last all winter. Liv, what do you think when you think wintergreen?
I didn't know what it was. I think gum, because a lot of like mint flavored gum is used with wintergreen. It usually has like in big letters wintergreen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the flavor of wintergreen is very common. Oh, Baron, do you have anything else you want to say? Oops, there you go.
So, I was thinking it would be evergreen as well.
Evergreen also. Yeah. So the flavor of wintergreen, the leaf and the berry, is very minty. And we've talked about mints before. We've talked about the mint family and the fact that the mint family has a lot of these like very, very strong flavors and strong smells. But wintergreen has a minty flavor, but it's not in the mint family at all. So it has a very similar flavor, and a lot of people, when they eat wintergreen flavored things, probably think, wow, this is really minty, and they probably think of mint if they know anything about mint plants. But really what they're tasting is the flavor coming from the the wintergreen. So the flavor of the leaves it's a fairly mild flavor. I think if you and Liv said that as well. It's weird because it's minty and mild. So it's a fairly mild mint flavor, but it's yummy. And the leaves, if you eat the leaves raw, they're pretty waxy. They're kind of thick. And that's one of the things that keeps them they're strong, they're hardy, they're able to survive throughout the winter. So they have, and when I say waxy, I don't mean like you're eating a candle, but that's just like a description. It's like a descriptive word that people give to thicker leaves. So it has a mild minty flavor. A lot of times people will make tea with wintergreen leaves, and I have actually never eaten the berries. I've eaten the leaves raw, and I've made tea with wintergreen leaves, but I have very rarely seen the berries on my own because, like I said, they need full sunlight in order. It's been pretty rare in my experience to see red berries on wintergreen. Liv was lucky enough. Liv, yours had berries on it, right? The one that you saw? Yeah. So the berries themselves are supposed to be stronger. The flavor is supposed to be more strong in that wintergreen flavor. And Liv says, I always eat the berries and not the leaves. So yeah, the leaves and the berries are both edible. They're fine. They're good for you. They're not toxic. And I wanted to pull up a couple of recipes that I'm also going to put on my website for you to look at with your parents. The first one is wintergreen ice cream. So this is probably a more complicated recipe, but I wanted you to know about that it's possible. I wanted you to know that it's a fun experiment that you could do. And it requires 2 ounces of chopped wintergreen berries. And if you have the ability to make a wintergreen extract with your family, you can do that as well. And what a wintergreen extract is either the berries or the leaves put into some alcohol. or you can also use this thing here. I'll just bring up I'll bring up the whiteboard. So so to make a wintergreen extract, you would use alcohol. You would use usually probably vodka or glycerin. So remember this word, glycerin is not an alcohol. It's like, it's a sugar, it's extracting in sugar basically. So if your parents don't want to do something with you all that's in alcohol, you can use this glycerin. But if you're doing an extract, like, have any of you used vanilla extract before? You just like you just shake your head or whatever. So it's a similar process to that. You would take wintergreen berries, wintergreen leaves, and just put them in alcohol or put them in glycerin and let them sit for a while, for like 2 weeks, a month, a couple of months, and then you strain off the leaves or the berries to get that really strong wintergreen minty flavor that gets extracted, gets saved basically in the alcohol or saved in the glycerin. And then you can use that liquid in very small amounts to flavor recipes in the future. So that's what an extract is. That's how you also make medicine. Medicinal extracts are made in the same way. And maybe we can do a particular lesson on that one day. Elijah, what's your question?
The other day, we last month we went to the store to get vodka because my mom wanted to make mate extract.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. That's using mate, putting mate in alcohol to and then eventually taking the mate plant material out of the alcohol, straining it, and having the medicinal qualities and the flavor of the mate in the alcohol. Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. It's an interesting idea. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which is maybe easier, is something that you could do at home, or you could do some sort of variation of this at home, which is, this is a really common use, especially traditionally in the past, is to make root beer with wintergreen. So now when we think of root beer, like like Barks root beer and like the larger soda companies, those are all artificially flavored sodas. Those are, scientists have made flavors that taste like this particular thing, and we drink it, and there's lots of corn syrup and that sort of thing. And I don't really drink soda. I don't know if any of you do, but this is a way of making a traditional root beer that is made with plants the way that it used to be made. So someday we will talk about sassafras, because sassafras is one of my very favorite trees. Someday we'll talk about sassafras and its medicinal qualities and the way that the plant looks and that sort of thing. I have a sassafras tree that's growing right out this window right behind me, and I love it. But this also calls for wintergreen leaf. And you can see it has a bunch of other things in here too: molasses, vanilla extract that we just talked about, cinnamon. Some people use birch, so birch tree, birch bark, also as a flavoring, and ginger is something that's pretty common. So this is somewhat of maybe a complicated recipe if you don't have all these things, but if you do a little bit of research with your family, you could probably make, and if you find wintergreen, you could probably make a pretty cool fermented root beer soda just with maybe wintergreen, maybe just with wintergreen and cinnamon, or wintergreen, cinnamon, and vanilla. I bet you have like at least a few of these things in your kitchen. And then when you ferment it, that basically is just having the sugar, you let it sit out for a little while, and the sugar is consumed by naturally occurring yeasts in the air, and then it gets kind of fizzy like a soda. Cool, yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Root beer kombucha is something that Liv, Liv, can you talk about that a little bit? What is root beer kombucha?
I don't know. My mom, she makes like regular unflavored kombucha, and then she makes this root beer syrup,
Okay.
and you like it kind of looks like she's making a potion, but she puts like a bunch of different stuff into it, like the sassafras, which we have growing in our backyard too. And I think she puts a little bit of like cacao in it, but
Cool.
I'm not really sure.
Cool. Yeah, so that's a similar, that's an interesting idea. So making the kombucha making kombucha by itself, which is like tea and sugar and that SCOBY, the bacteria and yeast that eats the sugar and eats the tea, is what makes kombucha, the special thing that a lot of people know about now. A lot of people make on their own and buy at health food stores, and you can kind of buy it everywhere at this point. But then having the kombucha, and it's, the kombucha is kind of like fizzy and it has that fermented quality to it already, and then adding a root beer syrup to it, which is basically, it's an extract made in a different way. So your mom probably takes a bunch of these different root beer flavored things and boils them in a pot, probably for a little while with it's probably like hot water that's making a really strong tea of these roots, and then adding a bunch of sugar to it to make the syrup, or maybe honey or maple syrup. Sometimes people might add instead of sugar. So that's a really good idea. And like we talked about making violet syrup yesterday. So it's the same concept, and you can do that with all sorts of different plants, and then have that flavoring and some of those medicinal qualities also. That's a really cool idea. Elijah, you had your hand up. Do you have a question or just a comment?
I was just trying to say I love the taste of kombucha.
Me too. I also love kombucha. I just started a batch of nettle kombucha yesterday. It was totally an experiment, and we'll see what happens. Jaden, you have a thought or a question?
Yeah, so probably a few months ago, me and my mom made apple kombucha.
Cool. Say that again?
It was apple kombucha.
And is that like making the kombucha and then adding apple juice to it afterwards, or do you remember how it was made?
Yeah, they do SCOBY with apple juice and stuff. It was really good.
Cool. So was it a little bit sweeter than usual, or did it taste about the same, just with like a little apple flavor?
I'm not really 100% sure. It was good though.
Cool.
Yeah, still got some.
That's great. That's cool. I will report back to you about my nettle kombucha experiment when I'm finished with it. Liv said, "Oh, any medicinal benefits to the nettle kombucha? Is that what your question was?" Oh, to the wintergreen. So I didn't do enough research on that. I'm not really sure. But if you give me, we have a couple minutes left. If you give me a couple minutes, I can look up in my books here whether or not they're in here. Baron, you have a question or a comment while I'm looking up this Liv's question?
Yeah, so my mom actually made jeune. It's kind of like kombucha, except you use honey and green tea instead of sugar and black tea.
Yes, jeune. It's spelled J-U-N. I have also made that before, and it's really, really yummy. There's a particular, like the SCOBY in June is it's a little bit different. So as far as I know, the bacteria and the yeast that are in June are specifically accustomed to eating the green tea and eating the honey, but it is super yummy. And there are some people who don't like to use sugar at all in any recipes, so that is, I think, why people have figured out how to make that. It's another really great fermented drink. So just quickly, the book that I have right next to me doesn't have Wintergreen in it, but it looks like some people use it to increase or to improve digestion, and sometimes wintergreen leaf is applied to the skin as a wash for achy joints, sore muscles, and lower back pain, which is similar to things that mint would be used for. So that the essential oil, the oil that's in wintergreen leaves and that's found in mints, is something that helps to bring blood to the surface. So if you like put it on your hand, say like my wrist really hurt and I wanted to help with the inflammation. If I had like a swollen wrist, I could put wintergreen leaves, like crushed wintergreen leaves, in like a wrap around my wrist, and that would help to bring blood to the surface and help the pain to go away. So I'll look up a little bit more, and maybe I'll give you some more information on that tomorrow. But we're gonna run out of time, and I don't want to keep running out of time in the middle of things. But tomorrow I'll talk to you a little bit about the medicinal benefits of wintergreen. Liv said they're going to make a wintergreen pie, maybe next winter. Cool. It's good to see you all, and I'll have these recipes up on my website, so you can go there. Okay? See ya.